I think that all comedians are wired slightly differently. After a while of talking to them, you go, I've spotted it. Saying something and then looking out, and then silence. That never gets easy.
You know, there's a stereotype about comedians and them, their perspective of themselves and not being happy or whatever. There's that like long enduring stereotype, and I've sat here with Jimmy Carr, etc., and he's told me, he actually said to me, he said you should ask comedians not are they depressed, but like who in their family was depressed,
Right.
which I thought was an interesting one. What's your whole observation as it relates to you on that like stereotype that comedians are either depressed themselves or their family was or their mum was or they had someone in the home they were trying to cheer up?
I don't know if I think that all comedians are depressed. I've said after a long description. It feels like I've supplied a lot of evidence to the contrary. But I don't think all comedians are depressed. But I think that all comedians are wired slightly differently. Certainly all the really good ones. Do you know what I mean? Or the ones that like something's happened. They've had something happen to them that has changed the wiring, that has made them an outsider in some way. And it might be depression, but it might be, it might be a change in circumstances. It might be a bereavement. It might be whatever. It might be a class shift. It might be their parents. There's something about comedians that they're just slightly different. Their wiring is slightly different. I do genuinely believe that, because whenever I talk to comedians who I really like, after a while of talking to them, you go, I've spotted it. Do you know what I mean? You go, there you go, there it is. Do you know what I mean? They've all got that. They've all got a little bit of like, they've all got a little bit of faulty wiring, I think. Or I don't mean faulty. I mean wired differently.
Different, yeah. What is that, in your words, for you? What is that different wiring that's made you like magnetized by the career of being a stand-up comic, a comedian, a writer?
I don't know. I think that like sort of, I think the speed in which everything changed, the sort of my life experiences, as well as the fact that I was sort of drawn to comedy anyway. All of my family, like my family is sort of all pretty comedically, they're all the love language at my house is taking the piss out of each other. Do you know what I mean? Like, my mum and dad, my brother and I just rinse each other all the time. That was what I knew. That's what my kids are like. That's what we're like in my house, and I think that that's kind of contributes to it. But I think that, again, I'm speaking from a position of deep ignorance, but like, I think having seen the normal trajectory for my dad and the trajectory that they wanted for me go so spectacularly wrong has allowed me to accept taking a different path. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think had that not happened, I probably would have gone, I need to get like a regular job, and follow this trajectory that my parents want. And I need to follow the milestones of success that everybody kind of attributes. Whereas this thing allowed me to go, well, do you know what? I'm just going to do the thing I really want to do, and let's see what happens. Do you know what I mean? And initially that was, before I was doing comedy, that was teaching. I didn't do teaching because I wanted to you don't do teaching because you want to make money, but I wasn't doing teaching because I wanted like respect from the community. I did it because I loved the idea of teaching children. And then I ended up moving into comedy, and I just sort of thought, I actually kind of have attached less weight to financial remuneration, to like having the nice house, to all of that. And I just want to do this. I just want to be driven by wanting to do this thing. Do you know what I mean? Because if you chase the financial thing, it can still go horrifically wrong. So why am I doing that? Do you know what I mean? I might as well chase it. That could still go wrong, but at least I'm doing something I enjoy. Do you know what I mean?
And that first, I was reading about your early sort of gigs in like pubs and stuff like that, with like 8 people or whatever. That first time a gig went well, maybe it was it Butlins your first?
That was my first when I was at 8, yeah.
How did you feel up on stage and the minute you walked off stage when it went really well?
Well, I can tell you a really specific gig, man, that like, it was quite a bit into, so I was, you were doing all these pub gigs, and I started to get to a point where I was starting to do well at these gigs, right? And I felt like, okay, I'm starting to get all right at this, for that level. Do you know what I mean? You certainly couldn't have put me on at the Apollo at that stage, but like, I was like, I was starting to feel like I was starting to do well in these gigs. And what I'd never done is I'd never turned a room. So what I mean is however the gig was going, I would go on and follow suit, right? So if it was a good gig, I'd probably have a good gig. If it was a tough gig, I'd still do all right, but I'd have a tough gig. The first time I absolutely buzzed my tits off is it was a tough gig. I was on second. And like the host had struggled, the first act had struggled, and then they got me on and I started and they were quiet. But by the end of the gig, it was like, I was like having a great one. And that was the first time I'd ever taken a room from being quiet to being a great gig. And I lost my mind. I mean, like, I was just like, the adrenaline was just insane, man. I came off just like, and you have to hide that, right? Because, you know, you don't want to walk off just going, yeah, man, yes, absolute smash time. So I had to like swallow that down and just go, I've got to leave quickly so I can scream in the car. But I felt, mate, that I remember, like, as the gig was turning, I didn't want to dip out because as soon as you go, this is going well, you're out at the moment, right? Yeah. So I had to just keep doing the gig, like, had a great response. And I was like, oh my God, that felt amazing. It was unbelievable, man. Amazing.
And has that kind of been your relationship with stage, where that's the real, like, that's the pinnacle in terms of like feelings and emotions and like, I guess, like affirmment?
I don't know. I mean, like, I definitely enjoy the buzz of doing live stand-up more than anything else I do. Mm-hmm. And like nothing else really matches up to it. I really do enjoy all the other stuff I do, but nothing can really compete with stand-up. I think it's partly because of the possibility that you could really die on your ass. Like, that is exciting, that it could go horrifically wrong.
But this is something I was going to ask is, as someone who said that there's that voice in your head and things can trigger it, what happens when it does go horrifically wrong on stage?
It just depends, because like, the truth is your mindset changes, right? Because like, when I started doing stand-up, if I did badly, it's probably because I was shit, right? Whereas like now, I feel like I'm all right at stand-up. And now the gigs that go badly, you need those gigs. You know, like, it's like going to the gym. You know, if I'm trying to write a new tour, I've got to write new material. So I go on with 10 minutes of new material and I try it out. If it goes for nothing, I'm disappointed because none of the stuff's worked. But it doesn't make me think I'm a shit comedian. I'm disappointed. Okay. These people are going to leave thinking Romesh was crap tonight. I can't do anything about that. But you're sort of going, this is part of the process. You know, you're like, I'm going to the gym. I've got to like, you learn more from those gigs. Do you know what I mean? And so it's still, don't get me wrong, it's still it's horrible. Saying something and then looking out, there's silence. That never gets easier, man. But you sort of go, this is what you've got to do. It's like when you've got to take risks in the small rooms so that when you do the big rooms, it's better. You know, like, you know, you want to do stuff that's on the, not necessarily on the edge, but you want to do stuff where you might do an act out that you wouldn't normally do, or you might talk about something you've never talked about before. And the risk is you might tuck into a big plate of shit. But when you're in the big room, when you're doing your tour, you'll go, I wish I'd taken more risks back then. Do you know what I mean? So you can't, it's kind of a different process. Having said that, I've done a corporate gig where I've died on my ass and I felt absolutely horrific. You know, like it's, oh God. It's just so awful, man.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.